Right, in person you get coffee. Have to make your own if you're on Zoom. All right. So now I believe we're live streamed. That. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can know what I'm doing. All right. Yes, we are live streamed.
Wow.
And everyone but Jean Marie, right? And Jean Marie had made it known she wasn't able to make it, so we have a good full house, including our newest member, Portia.
Welcome.
Hi, Portia.
So Dave, I'll turn to you.
Welcome to the January 21, 2022 meeting of the Long Range Planning Committee. We have a quorum here, certainly well over a quorum. Our first item on the agenda is to review the minutes from December of 2021. Anybody have comments? Or want to make a motion? Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
So I think since we're on Zoom, I officially have to do a roll call even 4 minutes. So go through and forgive me, I need to remember who are voting members and who are alternates and who are liaisons. So let's see, Rick Chenet.
I vote yes.
Peter.
I vote yes as well.
Alan.
I vote yes as well.
Marvin.
Yes.
And Dave.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Robin and Portia, you all are the alternates. And Don, you are the council liaison, and Rachel, you are the planning board liaison. So I believe I've called all the voting members. If I'm mistaken, let me know. Pretty sure I got it.
Okay. Second item, discussion of the comprehensive plan implementation. Okay, I guess.
Sure, I'll get started. So just for brief background for those who are watching and Portia who's joining us. So, I think everyone knows comp plan was adopted in June. We spent the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months going through the implementation table at the end of the plan and really trying to identify who might be the most likely lead committee or resource on the particular items. And so we've broken those out by various committees, and we'll be, and so now what we want to do is to start to look at those items that we left sort of in the wheelhouse or the lead, if you will, of the Long Range Planning Committee to start thinking about our work plan for the coming years, as it may be. Just something for us to all keep in mind that I know we've said a number of times, comprehensive plan is it's a 10, 12-year plan. So the expectation, there may be a lot there. It may feel daunting, but we have time. But, obviously as work comes up, and this is part of that process. Let's figure out how we want to approach this and attack this and take it in reasonable and timely chunks and consistent with everything else that's happening in town. So one of the things that Karen and I will be working on in the next, hopefully very soon here, really finalizing all the other committees' spreadsheets like we did with yours and sending a letter out to the chairs and probably, having a conversation with each committee chair to sort of set the stage for them to say, this is what the Long Range Planning Committee sees, and starting that dialogue around if they agree, how they see things sort of progressing. And of course, I think that discussion probably include each council liaison to each committee to be sure we're sort of aligning with council goals and priorities. So, so that's somewhat of stage setting. I think something else that might be worth just starting to talk a little bit about is and Don, I might put you a little bit on spot, notice here is just starting being mindful of the community survey that went out and how, what the thoughts are there from council. And also I know council has started working on their 2020 goals, 2022, whatever year we're in here, their goals for the upcoming year. And so really thinking again, how we can align not only our work, council goals, what other committees might be working on. And so maybe we can start setting the stage by just talking maybe at the highest level of some of those items, Don, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd be happy to, yeah. Do you want me to do that now, or are you going to do that at some point later?
Why don't I do this? And I failed to do it. It might be helpful to just do a brief introduction to Portia and with Portia, so she understands everyone's roles. And Peter, I do see your hand up, so I'll pause there for a moment. And
Can we get this turned up?
Yeah.
Because I'm having difficulty.
I'm turning up the volume in our room.
Thank
you. Oh, no. All right, Peter, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Gotcha. One thing I'd ask for too, Rick, I think you were on a bit of the implementation side of the last comp plan, and it'd be nice to have some lessons learned or maybe some narrative from you, if you could give us some hints about what we might want to expect. Maybe not now, but maybe as part of the discussion today. I'd certainly like to get some insight from your experience.
So do you mean comment on things that happened after we've approved the last plan, or?
Yeah, exactly. How once we approved the last plan, the committee or how the implementation process went well or didn't go as well as you'd hoped, or something like that. Just maybe a brief lessons learned from what happened after the last plan.
Well, you challenge my memory, but I will, at my advancing age, seriously, because the plan 2 versions back, I had not been involved with, so that's what we were updating, and of course we used a local professional to assist us with the process, so that was a similar process. And at the end of when we finally adopted not this plan, obviously, the last plan, Doug McCune, who had been on the committee, some of you may know Doug, put together a similar spreadsheet to what Jay has done, Jay and Karen have done this time around. And we went through a similar process. The difference was that there was no long-range planning committee at that time. It was just the comprehensive plan implementation committee, aka CPIC. And after we finished the plan and got it adopted, and Doug put together this fabulous spreadsheet, including suggestions as to who needed to deal with the implementation of various matters in the plan. The council decided that we needed a formal committee, the long range planning committee, to be formed and to take the lead in implementing various suggestions that were set forth in the plan. There were a lot more zoning type changes that were recommended in the plan. The Scarborough Downs zoning, for example, was one of the big issues. So council formed. Jay, remind me, was it the long range planning committee initially, or I can't remember, but in any event.
They stayed as the comprehensive plan implementation committee up until maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, when we finally realized that name was outdated and changed to the long range planning committee. But
right, so CPIC, aka long range planning committee, function much the same as we're functioning now. Really, the council's action added responsibilities to the long range planning committee, but we continued to do what we're talking about doing now. So it was different because there were a lot more zoning changes and a lot more interaction with the council, and a lot of meetings where we drafted and suggested zoning changes consistent with what the plans said we ought to do. what do I remember about negatives or issues? Only that it certainly was a tedious process. And I think we got through just about everything that was material that we needed to deal with. There were other aspects of the plan of lesser goals, staff-related things that were on the list, but I don't think there was no formal action. So quite frankly, I don't recall that there were any missteps or things that we should have done differently. The only thing is it took a while to push through the changes that plan called for. This plan, I don't think, has as much of that in it. So I don't see us running into issues with public hearings, issues with concerns by the public as to things we might do from a zoning perspective. I'm not suggesting that's plus or minus, it's just a process. So overall, I don't recall any significant issues. And Jay, of course, wasn't here, right? Jay, you didn't come on board until after we adopted the last plan. Am I right on that?
You are.
Dan Bacon.
Dan kicked off the process. I joined in 2010, essentially in the role that Eric's in now. It's support. I think, Rick, you also started talking about, I think the critical difference or a significant difference between this plan and the prior plan and the process we'll be going through. And we've talked about this sort of along the way, where the prior plan was a very prescriptive plan. It really laid out in this area, change the zoning to this. It was very explicit about how to change the zoning. With this plan, we've really realized that we've implemented those zone changes. We need to see, we're really starting to see those come to fruition. And yes, there might be little tweaks here or there, but by and large, our prior zoning before the 06 plan and the prior work was very Euclidean. It was commercial here, residential there. And, and we're really trying to get to, driving growth to our growth areas. And so now this implementation process is going to be much more about the systems that connect everything.
Right.
So I think there will be certainly challenges ahead. I think it'll probably be less zoning related and more, but certainly there will be areas of zoning. And I don't mean to say we're not going to get into zoning, but it's not going to be quite as, let's look at the TVC zone, for example, and completely rewrite that. It's okay, if we're trying to do all these things as grander goals, how do we weave this together? So,
yeah, I saw this effort this time around as more of a, how did we do on the last plan? And the things that needed dramatic changes this time around? And I didn't get the sense that that's what we ran into. It's more of a, how are we doing? And a little bit more on the fine tuning side and a lot less about, we really didn't suggest any zoning changes this time around. So I think, yeah, Jay, you and I, recollection is the same.
I think one thing that came out of it though was the fact that because they were all zoning changes, we had significant community input.
Right.
Every time we went to a particular area for a zoning change, one of the first things we did was engage the people in that area in meetings, and we went to them and sat down and said, these are the types of changes that we're thinking of. Give us your input. And we repeatedly did that. At times, if it was a significant change, we met with them more than one occasion, took their input, went back and saw them again and said, based on what you said, this is what we've come up with, and got their buy-in very early on, so that by the time things went to council for approval, almost everybody who stood up and talked said, yeah, we like what you're doing here. And so there was very, very little need to go back and forth with the council to get the changes implemented.
Right.
That and that was a significant thing, I think, that happened that was different from previous efforts to try to do such changes.
And Alan, you bring up an important point. They didn't remind me. I mean, they didn't do all the changes and bring everything to council at once. They sort of went change by change, so that nobody was overloaded with 50
Right.
changes.
That's what the matrix served as a rationing medium to be able to portion out the zoning changes over the course of time and not have that. Again, how we have a time frame on here, we couple them into groups of things to do at similar times.
I just really appreciate getting that sort of voice of experience as we shift gears into an implementation mode as a committee. So yeah, Jay, Alan, Rick, I just, like I said, I really appreciate just getting that sense of perspective as we move forward. So thank you.
Welcome.
Jay, I want to repeat back what I thought you heard, what I thought I heard you say about this plan.
Mhm.
And forgive me if it's a little scattershot. This comprehensive plan is about systems and connecting the different areas of town.
Yeah, and again, when I say that, it's really the difference between the last comp plan, which was very explicit in each growth area. It really broke out neighborhoods and said, look, in this neighborhood, go to densities of 3 to 5 units per acre and have this type of mix of uses. And it spelled out the types of uses that were anticipated. And so the implementation process was to take, as Alan said, pull that neighborhood out of the comp plan, put it on paper, have a meeting with that neighborhood and said, okay, neighborhood, here's what the comp plan says about your area. We're going to move in this direction. And of course, things get fine tuned as they always do. And then that's sort of, whereas this time we've really said, okay, the zoning's largely in place. We still want to direct growth to these areas in town, right? We've identified our regional activity centers and our other village areas and so on. And so now it's about, we're hearing a lot about, and I think, I'm sure Don hopefully will echo this, but I think we're hearing that traffic's a big concern, right? Okay, so we've implemented the zoning. We're starting to move towards these mixed use centers where people can start to maybe use other modes of transportation rather than a single occupancy vehicle. How does that start to play into our transportation planning? Because largely all our transportation planning, if you look back at many of our past plans, are really around single occupancy vehicles. How do we move cars through town? And then a little bit about sidewalks, right? Maybe we need to start thinking beyond that, or again, that's all going to be part of that conversation. And so that's just one example of what I mean by the systems. I think another good one is, again, I don't know that we'll necessarily be the lead. Maybe we'll probably have some role in it, but think about housing. Housing has been a big part of discussion in the community recently, right? What is the right pace of growth? What type of housing do we want to see as a community? There's a lot of concern about affordable housing, workforce housing. What do we mean by that? How do we intend to address those issues? I think those are more the type of things we'll be digging into rather than saying in this area, 3 to 5 units per acre.
And I think there's much more reach out to the other committees. I don't think we involve, the other committees in the actual making of the bread, so to speak, as we did in this one. So we've got a lot more systems with respect to, just as Jay said, housing is economic development, it's zoning, it's all sorts of different types of policies all mixed into one thing. Some solutions may be zoning.
It requests for review and reports as it does prescriptive changes. It's more of a system-wide study of issues. And I guess the output at the end is more reports or some sort, a
Recommendation.
findings or recommendations exactly, as opposed to a code adoption or code change per se.
And that's sort of why I was referencing, I think it's always good, particularly for this plan, to really understand where the council goals are, where the community, where the leadership
Yeah.
goals are, to help, okay, this year we're really concerned about this and that, and that's gonna change over time, of course, but I think, so we're not sort of working at cross efforts, or we're forwarding the efforts of leadership.
And that probably informs how we attack this list.
Yep.
Yeah. So Dawn's input would be important out of the council.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the introductions? I feel bad.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, Karen, that's a great point. Portia, do you want to start by introducing yourself, and then we'll go around and just sort of everyone give just a brief introduction of ourselves and our roles and where we come from?
Okay, well, my name is Portia Hirschman, and some of you know me well, some of you don't. I'm originally from East Booth Bay, and I have a degree in construction engineering, and for 25 years I was in project design and management. And then I became an ordained priest in the Episcopal Church and served 3 congregations and built 3 new church buildings, which involved dealing with 3 different towns and their ordinances. In Maryland, my last congregation, we helped the town develop a small wind ordinance and permeable surface paving. We also received a Maryland state grant to implement rain gardens, to take roof and parking lot runoff, to pre-filter it before it hit stormwater ponds, so that there was an attractive and yet functional role to that. Then I retired back to Maine, and we settled in Scarborough. And my interests are particularly affordable housing that is close to public services and retail, so that people do not have to have a car necessarily or depend on a car. Also interested in alternative environment and energy sources that we can look to improve in Scarborough. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Portia. I think what I'll do is I'm just going to go through the Zoom screens as I see them, and then we'll go around the room. So Don, you're next.
Thank you. Welcome, Portia, and good to see everybody again in long range. Happy to be standing in. I'm the alternate liaison to long range planning for the council. And I've been on the council since November 2018. I'm just starting my 2nd tour of duty. I'm chair of the Appointments and Negotiations Committee, and also the Ordinance Committee, and I'm a liaison to Coastal Waters and Shellfish Committees. So, and my wife Susan and I have lived in Scarborough for over 20 years. Our 4 kids all went through schools here, so we've been around. My wife grew up here, and yeah, so it's a fun time to be here in Scarborough, and look forward to working with you all on the work ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Rick, you're my next screen.
Sure.
You're on.
Well, welcome, Portia. I'm a Maine native as well, born in Waterville. Went to BC undergrad and UMaine Law, and came back here to practice law. I'm with a firm in town called Drummond Woodsum. I've been there for 30, going on 30, well, in my 37th year. And prior to that, worked for 5 years in the title insurance industry. My practice is primarily real estate. It's all real estate, really. I've been living in Scarborough with my wife Celeste since 1994. Raised our 2 children here, who are now thankfully making their way in their own lives. I've been on many bodies in town, including the planning board, which I chaired for a time, and I am currently on the president of the Land Trust, member of the SEDCO board, member of this committee, and enjoy helping things move along in Scarborough, so long as I don't have to run. I get votes to do what I do. So that's my brief background.
All right, Robin, you're next on my screen. Peter, Allen, you guys are on deck.
Hi, Portia. Hi, everyone else. I'm Robin Saunders. I am a Maine native, born in the Bethel area, but raised primarily on a chicken farm in Waldo County. And I am an engineer by trade. And my niche in the private consulting sector was really regulatory compliance, including stormwater and stormwater audits, and everything in between regulatory compliance and development. I am a former planning board member. I moved to Scarborough after I finished graduate school at the University of Maine College of Engineering. There were no jobs anywhere but the Portland area at the time. So having a 6-year-old daughter, it was important for me to settle in a place that had really good schools. And I'm really happy that I settled in Portland in the late 90s. And my daughter can't afford to live here. So she lives in Old Orchard. So I too am very excited about talking about affordable housing. But really, you know, I'd like to focus on, I'm going to bring some diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of ideas this year because, you know, it was really disappointing when my daughter did move to Scarborough and there was more diversity up in Orono, Old Town around the university where she went to school than there is in Scarborough. I'm also an environmentalist at heart, and natural resource protection is really also high on my list. But I get that people are part of the ecosystem, and we need to find appropriate housing for people. And we definitely have a housing crisis in our area. And I'll stop there. And oh, my mom was a minister also, Portia. So.
All right, thanks, Robin. Peter?
Yeah, continuing the theme, I'm a Maine native. I grew up, unfortunately, in Cape Elizabeth. And I was a Cape High grad, class of 91. Like so many of my generation, I then left for college and for work experience. I became a banker and a capital markets professional and moved back to Maine about 5 years ago because my work experience has now allowed me to be variously a hedge fund manager, a private equity fund partner, and a consultant for the financial services industry, living in a house in Scarborough, Maine, and commuting via plane. So that's been a good thing for me. My parents moved to Scarborough about 25 years ago after we left, my sister and I left the house. One of the original folks that moved into one of those developments along Eastern Road, which has been successful. I have a passion for infrastructure and community development. I really enjoy it, especially infrastructure writ large. I mean, the interconnection of housing, transportation, energy, water, sewage, all that sort of thing, those systems that underlie and underpin everything that makes up our lives. I think it's fascinating to watch those systems work. And my career in banking has been one of understanding how the financial plumbing works. So I enjoy actually now working with the legal and real plumbing of what makes our town work. I've been excited to really join this committee. I'm also on the zoning board. So no, you're not getting a variance if you ask. And I'm also on the Personnel Appeals Board. And Don, if you need more help on other sort of infrastructure related committees, I'm always raising my hand. It's been a pleasure to work with all you guys over the past year and a half. So that's me.
Great, thanks, Peter. Alan?
Yes, welcome, Portia. I also am a Maine native. I grew up in Old Town. Graduated from University of Maine here in Portland, Gorham. A little bit later on in life, as I went nights to get my degree. I live in Scarborough. I've been here since '95 after moving around for my job. I spent roughly 45 years also in the construction industry and in the building services industry. I work primarily on what I refer to as building infrastructure systems. Majority of my career was in building automation, fire alarm security systems, and various other systems inside a building. I used to say that if it's not an elevator, we touch it. Been doing that as far as the town is concerned. Got involved back, I think in 2004 with the planning board, did a 9-year stint with them. Been on CPIC and LURPIC. Currently, I'm the liaison for LURPICs on the Transportation Committee. I am also a board member of SEDCO. And most recently, I have become a Board of Trustee member for the Scarborough Public Library.
Thank you, Alan. Dave, you want to?
Hi, Portia. Dave Merrill. I've been on this committee in one form or another since the early 2000s, since the previous implementation comprehensive plan group came together in the early 2000s. Been a resident since the early 2000s. Went to school in Boston. Worked in architecture for 15 years and then jumped into the contracting trade several years ago. Raised a couple of girls here and who have now moved on, and trying to stay involved with the town. Have a passion for sustainability, infrastructure, building systems, and the whole built environment. So that's kind of why my enjoyment out of this group.
Hi, I'm Marvin Gates. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. Spent 2 months every summer at my grandfather's house here in Scarborough. Came back 50 years later in about 2013, bought a small piece of property on Black Point Road, an old market that we transformed thanks to the Zoning Board of Appeals into a residence and a contemporary art gallery, kept the feel of the old market. Own with my wife a small business, that aforementioned contemporary art gallery. We did about last year, being an extraordinarily good year for some reason, maybe approaching $100,000 of gross sales. Don't anticipate that happening again soon, but we'll see. My training is in fine art, graduate degree in painting from Boston. Otherwise, if I have an agenda about my interest in long-range planning regarding Scarborough, it would be like the idea of systems and connectedness, and particularly interested in connecting the growth that's going on to recreation, and think long-term about, obviously, the seashore is one of the, if not the main attraction to Scarborough for outside residents, and how we can integrate the growth with what's going on in relationship to the beaches and the boating and that sort of thing. But obviously interested in everything the Long Range Planning Committee is doing, and I'd like to think otherwise wouldn't be sitting here. So thank you.
Eric?
Hi, this is actually my second Long Range Planning Committee meeting, so happy to be here with you all again. My name is Eric Sanderson. I am a planner with the town. I've been here for about 2 months now, since November, and I actually just moved to Scarborough with my girlfriend back in May. So we've been here for 8 or 9 months now and really liking it. I grew up in Falmouth, and I'm glad to be in the greater Portland area and in Scarborough, and looking forward to working with you all.
Hi there, Portia. Let me take this off briefly. By the way, I have a 70-year relationship with the Episcopal Conference Center down in Rhode Island, both me, my daughter, and my grandson. I was actually born in Indiana, Columbus, Indiana, as my father was in the military and on his way through just before Pearl Harbor. So that kind of dates me. I grew up in Rhode Island, went to Brown University, and then into teaching. And as the civil rights movement moved up, I started to get a lot more into community organizing. I was the director of education for a tribe of Native Americans. I ran an anti-poverty agency, which had both Head Start, and we built houses in terms of sweat equity, and started a land bank down in southern Rhode Island. I tend to get involved in issues, and then as I get involved in issues, I start to dig a lot deeper into them and get additional education around there. So I got involved in a union movement when the Brown and Chop strikers were lost their jobs, and the union was broken. And from there, I moved into work with unions, ran a faculty unit, was recruited by the National Education Association to go down to DC and coordinate their higher education programs. Ended up as the coordinator of all of the field operations for the NEA. As part of all of that work of digging deeper into issues, I ended up with 3 masters and a doctorate. I've learned since then that I don't have to get that deep into anything. But my last master's was in organizational development, and I did a lot of work looking at systems, how organizations work, how systems work, how people come together, how organizations start to reflect the population. So that led me to volunteer a lot more here in Scarborough when we moved here in 2011. And I've been on the Parks and Conservation Land Board, the Conservation Commission, and I'm currently chair of the Planning Board and the liaison to the Long Range Planning. Welcome.
Hi, Portia. Karen Martin, along with Eric and Jay, I serve as staff to the Long Range Planning Committee. My title is I'm the executive director of the town's Economic Development Corporation, which is SEDCO. 2 of my board members were well represented. In terms of background, I'm a little afraid to say this. I'm not from Maine. So I grew up in Texas, and my 2 degrees are from the University of Texas. I have an undergraduate in economics and master's of science in community and regional planning from the School of Architecture. And I'll stop there.
Hi, Portia. I know we've worked with each other quite a bit in the past. I'm Jay. So just because it came up a little before, so I started working in town in 2007, I think it is. So I've been in town about 15 years almost. I've been the director for the last 4 plus. So for about 10 years, I really served in the role that Eric's in, primarily, working with planning board and then serving as support to the director and such. And so, so I think it was a good timing and transition in terms of working on a new comp plan and looking forward to getting this implementation stage off and running. I think one thing, Portia, that's helpful to know about this committee, we do a pretty good job of staying. We know it's an 8 o'clock meeting on a Friday. A bunch of people have to get to work. So typically meetings are an hour and a half. You'll see my Zoom invites are for 2 hours. That's because I don't want the meeting just to shut off right at 9:30. So I know that's, and I think the other thing, and Rachel can probably speak to this, we're in that organizational stage right now. So it may feel, I feel like, okay, the wheels are sort of grinding. What are we working on? But I think this is sort of that building the foundation, and we'll start to put the pieces together and things. It really puts us in position to move forward once we've sort of established our ground rules with this new comp plan. So yeah.
Jay,
Yeah.
two things I would say. This is Portia. First of all, I'm also on the Transportation Committee, which I failed to note. But 2, I have gone back and reviewed the YouTube videos for the Long Range Planning Committee for the last 2 meetings. So I'm not too far behind, hopefully.
Great.
Hey, Jay, can I just add, I know we've done the around the table introductions before, but we've never gone into as much depth as people have today. And I got to tell you, I am incredibly impressed by the diversity background of all of you. This is a great committee. Everybody brings such interesting backgrounds to it. And I think it's a testament to the work we do and the work we're going to do, that we've got such a diversity of backgrounds to help us work through these things. So I'm just completely floored by all of your backgrounds and very impressive credentials. So proud to be on the committee with you all.
Likewise.
Thanks, Rick. So we want to dive into the next
Yeah.
item here,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair? All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen and bring up this spreadsheet. I think, bear with me.
Jay, I'm sorry. Were we gonna hear from Dawn what the council's priorities were?
Thank you very much. Before I share my screen, let's do that.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I'll try to top line this for everybody, but we met for a good hour and a half on Wednesday night at a workshop. And I think this is the first time we did it publicly. In the past, we'd meet on a Saturday, a half day, just the council, and it would be open to the public, and we normally would only have 1 or 2 people show up. So it was a nice change there for John Clucci to just kind of bring it out into the open. So we reviewed 2021 town council goals, and then we made some suggestions for adjustments to 2022. I think in general, I'm pleased to say that I think that there's very good alignment, with what's been done previously, number one, and number two, what the long range planners, will look to you for, so in 2021, we had like 7 goals. A number of them were financial. One had to do with COVID. We were, looking at capital investments. We committed to no capital investments to over 5 million. We committed to a 3% mill rate in last year, and then we agreed to start publishing financials, with the finance committee, and then bringing those to the council. We had the downtown committee last year. We also had the comp plan, as obviously everybody knows, and there was a growth management ordinance review and revision that was implemented in June. And then we've got the charter. The charter recommendations are hanging out there. That's something that will be on the list for the coming year. The other 2 things we're going to carry forward are commitment to try to work on some sort of dashboard for town finances that we probably would review at a council level quarterly. And also there is a commitment to, there's a lot of discussion around the mill rate target. So there's a desire to try to keep that, but we don't really know if it's going to be 3% or, exactly what shape it will take, but there is a commitment to try to continue that. So that's sort of, high level sort of recap carryover from last year. The 4 things that John had offered that were pretty much confirmed by the full council are 4 things for 2022. Number 1, to advance the community center pool/hub concept as a priority. Obviously, growth and priority is a huge issue. 2/3 of the people in the survey, the town survey, indicated this. They were concerned with growth and development. So our focus this year as a council is to try to center on that topic, community center, pool, and hub, and to try to drive that forward together with the Downs and with support of committees and the public. That's not to the exclusion of the possibility of a consolidated primary school or the library. Those things also will be in the mix somehow. Originally, we thought we'd try to target getting this on the agenda for the public in November, but it might slide to June. But there's a commitment to try to really drive the focus to that particular aspect of development. There's also, second, a commitment to take a deeper dive into the survey work. I think we reviewed that a week or 2 ago. Very, very good piece of work. Lots of information from that. A really good reflection of how the community feels about what we're working on and our priorities. So we're just going to try to engage the staff and our committees to help us better understand where other improvements may be made. We also want to commit further to community engagement and communication. I think we've talked a lot about that, bolstering the impact of our committees, not only standing committees like this one, but also ad hoc committees, and really working hard to try to draw the public further into engagement and alignment with our work. And then finally, we have committed to update and modernize the impact fees. We haven't really done that in a while, and there's a strong feeling that we want to make sure that we're, charging developers what needs to be charge to like what's really being done in terms of infrastructure improvements, traffic, and so forth. So that's sort of the big wind up. The one thing I would say that was really, if you have a chance to do this, you ought to dial into the tail end of the workshop, in which Paul Johnson tried to articulate something I thought he did very well, talking about the blob. He used that as a way to kind of characterize generalized fear and anxiety about growth and development. And he kind of focused in on our work with the Downs. He said, let's try to give this concern a focus and a shape and an objective. And that will be in an article, a Counselor's Corner article in the Leader. It should be published today. So I'd just like to refer the committee to that. It was very, I thought, impactful and a very concrete way for us to get the council and also the community focused on, really solving some specific problems around growth and development.
Thanks, Don. And I don't know if folks have had an opportunity yet. The community survey results are right on the homepage of the website. So folks, and it's not a very long read either. A lot of charts and graphs. So
and the consultant did do a presentation if they wanted to watch that. I can't remember what the date of
I don't remember the date of the presentation either.
Don, do you remember what was the date of the council meeting that had the workshop that had the presentation?
I don't know offhand, but I could check it for you.
Okay, well, we could do that. We'll send it around to everyone.
A week or two ago, I think it was.
It was January anyway.
It was a really nice presentation. Yeah. So it explained a lot of detail in a good way.
Good.
Okay.
Ready to pull up the list?
Get more work here.
We'll see how far we get. Let's see, share my screen.
Okay, I'm going to run downstairs, get another cup of coffee.
Good plan. All right. And I did send an email this morning. We did have, last night I realized that we didn't actually have everything on the list that was originally emailed to you, so I apologize for that. But what you have before you, or what I emailed this morning, is what we're looking at this morning, what we're looking at right now, which pulls over everything. The things that we were missing were, we had gone through those items that had multiple committees as the lead, said long rangers / transportation. We felt, well, we really need to dial that in and give someone the lift on this, and then figure out how to do, once we're working on that item, how to incorporate the other committees. So this is now the complete list where the long rangers are the lead. So I think we're happy to talk about how we want to approach this, but I think Karen and I had the idea of maybe we go through the items, really looking, maybe we start based on the time frame that was listed in the comp plan. And then we sort of go through and just maybe go around the committee and just sort of say, let's identify this on a scale of a 1 to 3, say, and just start to add some more weight to these things, and as a committee, and then we can start to see how things shake out through that, and then we can filter further how they match with other goals of the community. And that can help us to start to frame the conversation, if that makes sense. So we don't have to, necessarily dive into exactly how we're going to do these things. But, do you think this is one of the more pressing things? We call that a 3, I suppose, more weight. Or, hey, with all the other things going on, maybe it's a 1. And everything might wind up 3s, right? Everything might be important, and that's fine. Everything is important. I don't mean it that way, but again, just start to give it weight. So does that sound like a fair way to get this thing started?
Does that mean we sort of focus more on the near-term items?
Yeah,
I
I think that's what we'll do, is we can just sort of walk through these. I can sort of read the recommendation for, each near-term one, and then we can just sort of go around and everyone give what they think a particular weight might be.
If I could just make an
Please,
observation, as I'm looking at this, basically everything that we have is near term.
Yes,
Uh,
there's very few that
There's
are,
one long term,
yep.
and then there's a lot of ongoing, and ongoing is kind of stuff we've done before, and might be a continuing theme in meetings. Just review different areas because it's ongoing. And then the near term, my suspicions are a good way maybe to separate this out or decide what we have to do first before we can do something else. Instead of, and look at it that way. So if we consider something is really important, let's say a 3, then go back and take a look and say, is there something we have to do before we can do that 3, before we can get to really working on that?
Is there a sequence needed? Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, everything is near term,
Right. But for our one long term.
but for one long term, right?
Yeah.
Let's do that one first.
Yeah. And I'm trying to keep everyone's screen up as well, but certainly those who are on Zoom, please just feel free to holler when you want to say something, because I'm afraid I'd miss the little yellow hand if it goes up. So so with that, do we want me to sort of read this first recommendation and then we
Yeah.
try to
breeze through
again?
it here.
Yeah.
Let's try not to get ourselves in the weeds on anymore.
So the first near-term item we come across is the outlying areas of the community west of the turnpike, where it is more difficult to provide public services that lack utilities such as sewer and water, that have significant natural resource and habitat value, and that may support natural resource industries, should continue to be considered rural areas. Within these areas, development should be at a scale that retains the rural character and in a pattern that protects natural resources and connects open spaces. And so I think as we think about these, again, start to weight how much, when I think about weight, it's not importance, I don't think, at least the way I'm thinking about it, it's when do we need to start working on this? If that frames it the way other committee members are thinking about it, or if I'm.
Jay, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just wondering how the Gorham connector fits into this.
I think that this is the type of sort of statement that would help us when we are having the Gorham connector conversations. The Gorham connector is certainly talked about in the comp plan, at least briefly. It probably is a recommendation that fit in with the transportation committee, but I think that's where we start to see the systems, right? Because that connector road is certainly going to have an interplay with land use, without a doubt. And I know that's, for what it's worth, the east-west corridor has always been talked about sort of as a 3-leg stool. It's, it's land use, it's public transit, and the connector road sort of all playing together. So,
Jay,
yes, I think the concept plays together well, Portia.
Jay, if I could make a sort of comment at one step above, if I look at all the Vision 1 recommendations,
yeah,
excuse me, they kind of fall into 2 categories. One is protect rural nature and develop rural resources, in the sense of rural recreational connectors, rural public spaces, etc., agricultural lands. And the other is for existing residential neighborhoods, enhance density, enhance development, enhance where the zoning is already kind of directing towards greater development. And if I look at the 5, I think it's 5 different recommendations here that are LRPC issues, they kind of divide neatly into those 2 categories. So maybe one thing we could consider is, do we have a rural project team and a existing residential project team, or to examine what might be usable in code or usable in steering planning design for each of those two very different objectives. But this first one strikes me as being as part of that rural one. And then if I look at the second one, for example, protect natural resources, it'd be in that first category. The other two, the next two would both be in that residential established category. And then the fifth one is kind of a general comment. So I just offer that up as maybe a way to guide ourselves through the Vision 1 recommendations, which all kind of have a flavor to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Dave?
Yeah.
And as we returning to 1 through 3 and going to item by item, I would be interested in, if it's appropriate, in and suggest that we ask the council liaison, Don, to let us know what the council viewpoint of these items are. We don't have to agree with them, I don't think, but is that a reasonable suggestion?
All input is good, yeah.
Don, can you sort of item by item say this one sort of stands out as something the council thinks is important versus this is maybe a little later in development or that sort of thing? Is that?
Sure, I could give it a try. Take a swipe at it. This is the division ones that are on the board now, that are Jay's screen. Or do you mean overall?
No, item by item is what I'm suggesting.
Okay. So Jay, I'm just going to follow what you have on the screen in front of everybody. You know, the services and utilities in the western part of town, you know, that's definitely a focus, you know, and that's kind of tying that in with, you know, commitment to natural resources and preserving open spaces. I mean, these are very critical, I think, strategically and also practically. They're definitely on the list. Those are things we're going to be looking at as we go through. I think every development we're going to be talking about, you know, public spaces, and every contract zone, you know, process will be focusing very carefully on that. So I think that's an important way for us to balance the pace and the volume of development. So those are very important, 1 and 2. Jumping down to the majority of new residential development located in the growth areas. I think a statistic that Paul used is in 2019, I think, or 2020, there were 421 residential units built that, you know, all in, or 419. 400 of them were in designated high growth areas. Only 19 were in low growth areas. So I'm getting a message that my transmission isn't so good. So hopefully you're getting that.
Yep, you're coming through. It's a little.
Are you getting that, Jay?
Yes, we're hearing you. We're hearing you.
And then I can't see the one. I can't see the one below residential development on the screen here. Could you scroll up? Yeah. Okay. So the identity and livability of the neighborhoods. I think that patterns very well after the other two. And, you know, I mean, the future zoning changes, you saw the ones that we did on the growth management ordinance. We'll be looking at these very carefully. And even with the current Downs exemption request, we'll be looking, you know, at that. And we'll also be looking at, you know, further defining and refining how we apply the community benefit standard as part of the, you know, contract zoning process. So, I mean, those are right in the wheelhouse of this group. And also I would say the same for the council.
I will say it's kind of nice to see these action items that are just things that we do, right? Like this last one, that there's nothing there
Yeah.
there's no to do, there's no there. It's just, as you think about these things, this is the work we need to do. So Don, I tried, just keeping, and again, we don't have to do this 1 through 3 thing, but just try to keep it at least some notion. I tried to capture, based on your discussion, the weights that I might have been hearing based on what you discussed, and I heard really a 3 on the first 2, just for what it's worth. The 1, at least in terms of what's happening in town, where 400 out of the 419 were already directed in the right location. Maybe there's not, obviously, something to keep our mind on, but not a whole lot of lift there. And then I added a 3 to the others. Is that a fair assessment? And Robin, I do see your hand up, so I'll say, Robin, what's up? You're mute.
Robin.
Still on mute, Robin. Like I said, I'm not quite seeing everyone else, so if someone else has a hand up as well, I'm sorry if I'm missing it.
Sorry, Jay.
We got you.
So I just want to make a couple comments and pose a little bit of a question that if we go back to this full vision, that the Scarborough Marsh for Vision 1 is essential to the town's identity and creating a special awareness by our residents of the importance of all of the town's natural resources. I'm going to challenge this committee to understand that, some of our heaviest designated growth areas, Hygas, Downs, Oak Hill, all drain to Scarborough Marsh, okay? And we are doing a lot of development on green fields. And when you do development on green fields, you should have a higher level of natural resource protection. For example, I work for the city of Westbrook. We're doing a lot of urban renewal type things. But when you build on green fields like the Downs, we really need to understand that there should be higher protections on the natural resources in our development. I haven't sort of thought all of that through on what that would look like as far as ordinances or being more stringent than the state, but there is an opportunity to do that. And if it means making sure that the marsh is protected appropriately, then I think we really need to think about that in a really big way, considering all of the development, the impervious spaces, the drainage that's been altered, the hydrology here. I'm going to stop short of hugging a tree, but I need you all to understand that this is very different what's happening in Scarborough Downs and how it impacts Vision 1. But it's not just Scarborough Downs, it's Oak Hill, it's Hygas, it's our designated areas, and it's not unique to Scarborough. If you look at where Maine DOT built all their public works facilities, they're on the edge of wetlands because 50 years ago, nobody valued the wetlands. So I'll just stop at that.
Jay, and Robin, first off, in concept, I'm wholly on board with that. The one thing I'd say, though, is I think the Downs is a great project and well considered because it's not really a greenfield project. Properly speaking, it's a brownfield project. The Downs was a developed area, developed definitely before the era of environmental thoughtfulness. But nevertheless, it was a transformed area that has already been markedly altered by human development, so making it again a brownfield development. And I think that's why the Downs represents for Scarborough a great example or exemplar project, because we're taking something that has already been altered substantially, and we're using it to allow the town to not have to develop or not to look at the development of more proper greenfield developments, which have not been substantially altered yet. And I think you raise a good point about, for example, the Hygas Parkway, where there's a lot of land on both sides of that really has never been used before, but is now marked for development. But I don't disagree at all with your overall concept. I just challenge you a little bit on the Downs specifically as being a greenfield. So
no, if I can respond, just saying though, that I see what you're saying about, you know, I have a hard time calling prime farmland brownfields.
Gotcha. You know, but once it's been, and again, once you've put a bunch of stables on it and a track and that.
I'm a
Yeah.
farm girl, sorry, but there were agricultural BMPs in place that are missing. So, yep. Thank you though. I completely appreciate being challenged on that. Thank you.
If I could say something kind of to play in the middle is I think we need to consider that the protection of the marsh is number one. And for redeveloped areas, there may be a standard of meeting certain qualifications as opposed to then setting perhaps higher standards than high growth. But I think that both need to be considered, both the redevelopment and the new development.
Good compromise, Portia. I like that.
Just trying to find where, because I know that was one of our goals or one of the strategies in the plan was about really looking at stormwater and development standards sort of in our growth areas, particularly in those urban impaired stream areas. And I can't remember if that came to this committee or
I think it went to conservation.
it might have went to conservation. So, but so where does that, so hearing that and this first vision is really more about those outlying areas, which understanding, as Robin's pointing out, that even those have impacts. West of the Turnpike has impacts on our marsh, right? And I think that's at least in terms of this first one. So I'm hearing that largely this is something that we want to be mindful of. And Robin, did I hear a 3 from you on this? Generally, if we're staying within that weighting parameter?
Is that the highest? Is 1 through 3?
Yeah.
I think that's the objective here.
I do, but I think that goes, sorry, is somebody speaking at the meeting?
Yeah, I think there was
My question was, comment was, let's keep going through the list if that's the goal. And ascribe or assign numbers to the various. And yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's what I was mumbling here, Robin.
I guess, Jay, in a related question on that one, what do we do with that 3 now? Do we assign members of our team to examine it? Do we what do we do as an outcome for these?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Really what I think Karen and I envision is we're just trying to assign some type of weight to this stuff so that this is the first shake through the filter, if you will, or maybe the second or third shake through the filter. And we're just trying to get to what are going to be the top priorities that sort of percolate to the top and that we can see align with the other goals and priorities for the year with council and where the town is headed. So I think it very well may be that after we go through the 20 or whatever number of these there are, that 15 of them are all number 3s and are top weighted. And then we'll have to look at that and say, okay, there's only so much time, energy, and resources the town has. Again, keeping in mind, this is a comprehensive plan implementation. This is a 10-year, 12-year, this is an ongoing process. This isn't a tomorrow thing. This isn't a 2022 thing. So I think, Peter, you had actually, it was something I wanted to sort of touch on. You talked about, do we break apart into different subcommittees? I just don't know that we have the capacity there's only so much we can take on, right? So I think that's what this is about, is what is it we're going to try to make as our priority for this year. But also, I think it's also, I always sort of keep in mind that priorities change, things come blowing in the door you never imagined would. And the comprehensive plan is should always be that backstop, this document that says, okay, here's this new thing we didn't even see on the horizon. What does the comp plan tell us about this? So though we may not be, let's just pick this first one, though we may not be working, have our top priority for the year to work on areas west of the Turnpike, well, when the Turnpike Authority comes in with the east-west corridor, we're going to turn to this statement and say, okay, Turnpike, we're happy to work with you, but these are our concerns west of the Turnpike. How does this east-west corridor help us address this issue? And there's a number of others in the plan. So,
Jay, it's a little,
Yeah.
I think it's helpful too, to remember what the action is. And like, take the first one, it's reviewing the zoning ordinance. And so that's why there's staff work and coming back to you and saying, all right, here's a summary of what the zoning ordinance says. And we're not looking at everything. The focus here is the zoning ordinance, to take a look at that and see how it matches with this goal.
Yeah, and that's helpful. That action that we're supposed to be doing, I think, is a good focus for us as to what we then do next. And so I totally hear you on the priorities, Jay. It's just thinking of what we as a committee do and what we work with staff to do is kind of what I'm trying to understand.
I think we're all trying to understand that, to be quite honest. I think, again, to me, it's really a matter of when we are thinking about this in terms of systems, if it is truly, hey, you know what, transportation, and I'm just grabbing that one, it doesn't mean that's the one, but just as an example, transportation is the number one pressing issue in town. Well, maybe we start working on transportation issues, and these type of elements help inform that discussion rather than focusing on these elements as the to-do work on zoning. But how does it help inform these other elements? If that made any sense, it may not have.
Well, and Jay, I think it does. It's just that in that light, I think it might be helpful for us to take a lift up and say, hey, we've got clearly a transportation priority. We've got a rural development or rural preservation priority. We've got a high growth development priority. And so we've got really 5 or 6 categories across all 20 of these, or roughly 21, whatever it is, that we can take a lift out of and then look at and then go back to council and say, okay, here are the 5 categories of planning of long range planning objectives that we've identified. Which one of these 5 do you want us to focus on? Is it transportation because the connector is coming down the pike really hard? Is it high growth because the Downs really needs guidance? Is it rural because that's coming out of the survey? I'm just throwing things out here. I'm not saying any one of these are what it is, but we got some themes I think that emerge that go down from 20 to maybe 4 or 5, and then we can really prioritize those themes and work on those.
Marvin. Peter, I'm following you. I think when the question about what are we doing, what is our role, if that's sort of what you're saying, my understanding of it is we're supposed to first and foremost support the council, and I find a lot of value. Of course, a council member, whether it's Don or Jean Marie or both, is always here, but given the assignment in front of us, I think it's really valuable to me. Maybe everybody already knows what the council's priorities are, but it's very valuable to me to hear, Don, you say, just go down the list and listen to what your representation of what the council's priorities are for this list. And that puts me at least in the ballpark of how to start. So I would ask that we continue doing that if possible.
And I think that process, if I might as well, can help us lift those 4 or 5, whatever those,
Absolutely.
what are those weighty things, right? Now we start to say, okay, now let's put them together and say, here are 3 or 4 that are all rural related, here transportation related. These are 3s, these are 1s, and we start to at least formulate buckets of work.
Yeah, but I see us getting into the weeds and getting too far into studying them now as opposed to just putting a number on them. So I think let's try to be more cognizant of just a gut instinct. Where does it sit in the weight perspective, so we can get a better look at the whole as opposed to the parts.
in recognizing it's 9:20, I think, would it be helpful, and, you know, not to put our counselor on the spot, but would it be helpful to try to go through here sort of from a council perspective, what those are, get that in, and then reshare this document, because unfortunately, as I said, you guys got half the document last time, and sort of everyone come back to the next meeting with their thoughts in this sort of waiting? Or do we want to try to punch it all out in the next sort of, say, Don said it was a 3, do we all generally, give me your thoughts here.
I was gonna say, to be fair to Don,
Right.
he needs probably a little more time
I
on just
agree.
off the spot
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I was going to make an appeal for that, and I'd like to get some alignment from my counterparts in the council. The other thing is we haven't really seen the revised version of the council goals based on the work that we did on Wednesday. So we should have that in the next week or so. But we certainly have time between now and the next meeting to get a council opinion on that. You know, and I'd be happy to, you know, socialize that with the council and come back.
That might be a good time to put that our next meeting.
So do we want to so maybe we take a pause on this for this morning, because we do have at least 1 or 2 other things on the agenda. We'll resend this out. What I'll do is I'll put a column that, you know, asks everyone to go through, put your, you know, and you can send that back to me. We can then, for our next meeting, we can have it a bit weighted out. And then we can talk about, you know, those areas that makes sense?
Yeah, and I think it would be good to have whatever the council has put forward for us to try to interpret in our own minds what the council goals are, so we can get them into alignment with the vision.
And is there a formal request we could make of the council to prioritize these? Is there a...
Well, I think so.
Hey, Jay, Alan's got his hand up too. I just wanted to put that out. Sorry.
Didn't see it. Alan was off our screen. Go ahead,
Alan's on
Alan.
mute though.
You're muted, buddy.
The only thing I was going to suggest is that if we're going to rank these, which I have no problem doing, it might be easier if we rank Vision 1. And if you look at Vision 1, rank those 1, 2, and 3 as a group. Then go to Vision 2 and then rank those 1, 2, and 3. Because then we'll have our list of 3s and we can compare to see how that relates to what the council is saying. And otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to look at what's a 3 if you've got to go down through all of the visions at once. It's just 1, 2, and 3 is going to be tough enough because it's a small group to try to rate. So you'd have your top, I'd almost look at it and, you know, well, anyway, that's what I'm trying to say.
Alan, I agree with that. I think it gets to Robin's point earlier about sort of what Vision 1 actually is its entirety. Yeah. Each of the visions has a sort of statement. And I think the comprehensive plan process agreed that each of those visions are equally weighted. We're not saying that one vision is better than any other vision.
Correct.
So I think I like that suggestion. And then we can look at within each vision, what is the top priority? I think that makes a ton of sense.
I would also suggest that before the next meeting, if we go through these and rate them and get it back to staff prior to the meeting, then they can do all the totalizing before the meeting itself. And we'd be just a step further ahead again.
That makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
And Jay, just in that vein, because we're trying to say these are all, you know, relatively important, it's a little bit about what do you want to start with? What do we start with? Which one of these do we start with?
I turn back to the council. I mean, we're serving at the behest of the council, and also we're in support of staff. So I look for your guidance, and then we go to work as far as, okay. And if I disagree with you strongly, I'll say something, but I don't have the authority basically to make those decisions. I look to the council and to you.
But in terms of priorities, I don't think we're trying to say, as Jay just said a minute ago, we're not saying something is a lower priority, we're saying one piece is either easier to start with or aligns more with what the council agenda is, but we just need a starting point, which one first?
Well, if we do that, then we can rate all the threes.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
And my guess is, Don, and I won't speak for you, but my guess is the council probably would appreciate us coming with a starter for 10. And then you can critique us. And we're definitely happy to receive critique.
That'd be great. That'd give us something to pivot from. And, that's something that Jean Marie and I could, figure out how to do a quick turn with the council. But that would be great. It'd give us a starting point. We'd like to hear your view. That's kind of what we do in a lot of things. We look for your steer on it, and then we have a chance to talk about it ourselves. So,
And I think that's, just keep in mind that we have our 20 or 25 here, but then there's actually 150 or whatever the number is across the whole comp plan. So council's going to be getting a lot of feedback from a lot of different committees. And then they're going to, there's going to be, so it's that first cut to say, okay, council, we're here in support of you. Here's what we see. Tell us, this is what, as a support committee, this is what we see, and get that feedback from long rangers, transportation, shellfish and coastal water, all the different outfits. And then council's still going to have a big bucket of saying, oh my gosh, all right, where do we start to put the pieces in the resources that we have here? So, this isn't a quick or easy thing to do, but,
okay, so we'll go back and forth. You'll put out the list, we'll rate them, get them back to you.
we'll have it.
In the meantime, Dawn can solicit some input from the council of goals and try to meet in the middle.
And we will, I guess the other piece of that is Karen and I will get things out to all the other committees within the next week or two, or by mid-February. Obviously, they're going to need some time and probably some staff support to, right? Because they haven't even been as close to it as you all have, though many helped inform the comp plan process, but that's been some years. So anyway, we'll endeavor to do that.
Transportation meets Tuesday night.
Yes.
Okay, so can we move on to the next one and try to get ourselves in alignment at the time? Update on the state review of the comp plan.
Share. Sure. So let's see. So we submitted the comp plan, I think, in September. I'd have to look at the date, but I'll say September, early fall, to the state for review. So just so folks know, comprehensive plan. Once it's adopted locally, that is your comprehensive plan. That is the plan. We are working on it. There is, in state statute, a Growth Management Act, which talks about comprehensive plans and adoption and finding of consistency at the state level. And really that does two things for a community. One, it provides access to certain funding sources. Those funding sources, frankly, are pretty limited. It doesn't hold you back from much, but there might be a few grants that we try to go after where they say, hey, until you have a consistent comp plan, you're out of luck. And then the other one, sort of probably the bigger one, is it has to do with the sort of, and Rick, you might have to step in, the sort of the legal protection of your zoning. Zoning is to be found consistent with your comp plan. And if the town were to be challenged on a zoning amendment that we might make based on a comp plan that is yet to be found consistent by the state, I don't, once it gets into the legal world, it becomes gray to me. So Rick, maybe, do you want to speak to that, or am I putting you too much on the spot?
No, it's sort of actually the flip side.
Okay.
You can't have zoning other than shoreland zoning, which is state mandated. You have to have a comprehensive plan in place in order to have zoning. And if you have a comprehensive plan that says there shall be no commercial development in the Black Point area, Yet you have zoning, because in this case, you already have zoning. But if we had amended the plan to prohibit or to permit, say, commercial development in Black Point, and the zoning doesn't permit commercial development in Black Point, you'd have an inconsistency problem, and the zoning would be open to challenge. So it's the comp plan that supports zoning, and zoning needs to be consistent with the comp plan. The whole issue of consistency with the comp plan has been litigated time and again in Maine, and it's not black and white, but that's basically how it works. So we're not out of compliance state law, and I think our current plan does not have any zoning related inconsistencies.
Thank you. And so let's see, so then we did receive, so the state actually received about 7 or 8 comp plans all at once. They lost some staffing. There's all sorts of things happening at the department that reviews this. I think they're down to 1 person, Tom. And so Tom had been emailing me all along saying, yep, I'm supposed to get you something by November 6th. I'm not going to make that date. I'm supposed to get you something by November 30th. I'm not going to make that date. So we finally got his first sort of staff level administrative comments to Karen and I. We're working through those sort of on the administrative side. It's clear there's just things he didn't see in the complaint, things that he's sort of asking questions about. We're like, yeah, we talk about that right here. So what we're going to do is sort of go through his list, try to set up a meeting with him. And so we can sort of go page by page and say, yep, we got this. Do you agree? And knock out probably, we're thinking 90% of the stuff he sort of sent in his draft comments till we sort of get a formal letter from them about what we might need to do to augment the current plan. We've talked about this all along. There's likely to be some modifications that need to be made to get to state consistency. And then we can talk about what that looks like. We already have some ideas around that, but just want to let folks know that's ongoing.
And they still have some more review. They didn't finish the checklist yet. They only gave us a few things.
Yep. And I will say our friends at GP Cog, Vanessa Farr, folks may remember, helped us at the very end of the process doing some editing. They actually had some technical funding to help with the process. So she's been, Karen and I have had 2 pretty good meetings so far with her. And so we'll be working through that process in the next, it might be months, just given Tom's the one state reviewer's time frame, because as we understand, his supervisor just left the department. So it's going to be this will be an interesting process, to say the least. But
are we in any jeopardy with time frame or anything that would impact going forward?
I don't believe we are. I think I think as Rick was just saying, we have an adopted plan, right? So there might be a couple of funding sources out there, but that really hasn't been a hindrance to us in the last 2 years where the state has,
so very specifically, if the council wanted to approach the idea of amending the growth management ordinance, does this comp plan have to be approved before they do it?
So they actually amended the growth management ordinance last June, early in June, before the comp plan. And so I would say it doesn't have to be. And again, this comp plan really sort of talks about keeping an eye on the growth management. It doesn't give us, again, not being a prescriptive comp plan, it doesn't say, hey, we should look at X number of growth here and Y number of growth there. It just says, hey, we should keep in mind our growth management ordinance, and is it still doing the job to direct growth to our growth areas, right? That's the general sort of oversimplifying it, but just for the sake of this discussion. So I think we're, certainly any zoning changes that come up, our attorney lays eyes on and would let us know if we're running afoul of anything, but I think we're in good stead. Yep. So that's the update. It's ongoing, and it'll probably be, if I had to guess, another 2 months anyway, just based on availability of state time, frankly. So that's what I have for an update.
Public comment?
I'm just looking to see if we have a member of the public. We do have one member of the public viewing. And I will ask Mr. Mind King if he has any comments to raise his hand. We'll wait a beat for him to find the button if he wishes. And he did. All right, Rick, I'm going to bring you in.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Thanks. And folks, I really appreciate all the hard work you do. I don't really have a comment other than to say that, it's great that you're taking a look at this. And in terms of the sustainability committee's role in helping transition with this new comp plan, please let us know how we can help you and support your efforts. So once again, thank you for taking this on and doing the good work that you've done in the past. That's it.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. And as chair of the Sustainability Committee, I'll be reaching out to you very soon. Oop, I think I cut you off. Sorry, Rick. My mistake. If you wish to say something, let me know, but I think you were just saying thank you. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Our next meeting?
So as Alan, I think astutely pointed out, boy, January 21st is awfully close to our normal meeting date of the first Friday of each month. So I think maybe we look to the first Friday in March. Does that make sense to folks? That'll give us time to both send out the spreadsheet to you all with the new column, and for you to do your work and us to synthesize that, as well as for us to work with the other committees, get this information out to the other committees, and through the state review process as well. So if folks are comfortable with March 4, that would be, I think we're.
Hey, I would agree with that. This is Robin, and I would maybe even give us a suspense date of February 4th to get our homework into you, so you guys have plenty of time to look at it, and you can even bounce it over to the counselors if you'd like before then, so Don's not on the spot by March 4th. Does that sound reasonable?
You're gonna provide us with something.
Yes,
Right.
I will send out email and I'll lay down the gauntlet with the date. And
No,
then
next meeting, March 4th.
Yes. And so Portia, just so you appreciate, and you may have already known this, we typically meet the first Friday of each month. Holidays and such obviously mess up January, and that now trickled into February. So we're going to shoot for getting back on schedule, March 4, first Friday, 8 a.m. And we'll see what Omicron's doing at that time, but I imagine it will also be a hybrid meeting. If I had to put a wager down, I'd put a lot of money on it.
So just in replay is you're going to be sending out a spreadsheet revision to us. We are to get back to you, and you're going to set up a target date so that we can keep this thing moving. And then you can review it, either bounce it against us for more information or send it to council, whatever, before our next meeting on March 4th.
Excellent recap.
Okay, because I know
Man, am
how
I
the
glad
state
you're on.
slip with transportation, we kind of slip too. So I just want to keep on target here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, good. We have a motion. Are we good now?
I believe. Oh, Peter. Yep.
I will do two things. First off, I'd appreciate Portia dialing in from Key West from a windowless room next time. And I will. I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
What a guy.
Second.
All in favor?
I think we'll take that as a vote.
Thank you all.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.